Hello, my name is Glenn Pax, and I welcome you. Today, I'm going to begin by telling a story. Now, it might be that you've heard the story before, in which case, that's just fine, because it is often a wonderful thing to hear a story a second, or a third, or multiple times, because each time that we hear the story, we are coming to it with a different number of experiences behind us in life that have brought us to this point. And these different experiences and the context that we are in allow us to understand perhaps something different, something new, something additional from the story. So I hope that this is the experience that you have today with this story. So once upon a time, there was a country. And there was something very special about this country, because every one of its inhabitants were blind. Now, nobody knew why this was so, because they had been blind so long that nobody remembered how they became blind in the first place. In fact, nobody even remembered that there was such a thing as sight. Now, in this country, they had a number of different kinds of animals and species of plants, but for some reason, there had never been an elephant in this country, and the people had never actually come face to face, had never actually encountered an elephant. Now, they had heard about elephants from passers-by, from travelers who came from other countries and passed through theirs. So they knew that there was such a thing, but nobody had ever encountered one, and so they had no idea exactly what an elephant was like. Now, one day, a traveler came through the country and said that there was an elephant very nearby. In fact, in the neighboring country, just over the border. And the leaders of this first country got together and said, wow, we finally have the opportunity to find out just what an elephant is like. We should choose a team of people to go over to our neighboring country and meet the elephant, and find out exactly what it is like, and then come back and report that to us. And so they went ahead and they chose a team of 5 highly respected and learned people to go and meet the elephant. Now these 5 people, they went on a journey through mountains, across rivers, and finally they arrived at the neighboring country. And they asked around, where is this elephant? And the people directed them, until finally they came to the exact place where the elephant was. Then they asked somebody to bring them up to the elephant, right next to its side, and each one of them touched the elephant. Now the first one touched the elephant on the trunk. The second one touched the elephant on its tusk. The third touched an elephant's ear. The fourth touched one of its legs. And the fifth touched the elephant's tail. After standing there a few minutes in awe because of this once-in-a-lifetime experience of being able to encounter something so new and different and amazing, the 5 people returned to their own country. And after another long and arduous journey, they arrived. And of course, back in the first country, all of the people were waiting their arrival, excited, eager to hear about the nature of just what an elephant is. They crowded round these 5 people and asked them, please tell us, what is the elephant like? Now the first person who had touched the elephant's trunk said, I'll tell you exactly what the elephant is like. It is just like a snake. Upon hearing this, the second person, the one who had touched its tusk, said, now wait a minute. I was also there. I touched the elephant, and it was nothing like a snake. In fact, I would say it was something like a sword. The third person interrupted and said, hold on. I touched the elephant too, and I think you're both wrong. For me, the elephant was just like a curtain. The fourth person butted in and said, no, you're all wrong. The elephant was just like a tree. And the fifth person said, no, the elephant was exactly like a rope. And so these 5 people argued for the next hour or so about just what the elephant was like. And all the people in the crowd were listening to this and taking it all in, and slowly they made their decision about who they wanted to believe. Some of them may have respected one of these 5 people more than the others, and so they decided that they would believe this one. Some of them may have been convinced by the charisma of one of these 5 people, by his or her exuberance in giving this description of the elephant. In any case, most of the people in the crowd chose one of these explanations to listen to and to believe. And after that, all of these 5 people, after arguing for an hour, decided to go their separate ways, and all the people from the crowd dispersed and followed one of these 5 people. And from then on, in this country, there were a number of different groups of people who all believed that they knew just what an elephant was like. The one group said the elephant was like a snake, and the other group said the elephant was like a tree, and so on. And any time that a member of one of these groups would encounter a member of another group, they would get into a heated argument because they believed so passionately in just what this elephant was like, according to their teacher. Now, just what is the point of this story? Well, I've traveled a bit. I've traveled to something like 30 countries in all parts of the world, east and west. And I've lived, worked, studied in 7. And I have worked with people and talked with people and had relationships with people from all sorts of backgrounds, cultural, religious, ethnic, etc. And after this traveling, after this time of encountering all these people, I have come to the conclusion that there is one particular threat to the safety, security, happiness, and well-being of the earth, its inhabitants. There's one particular threat that goes beyond all other threats, and this, of course, seems to be an extreme thing to say, considering, I'm sure if you take enough time to think about it, you could come up with dozens and dozens of threats to peace in this world. But I think there's one that underlies just about all of them. And this is that there is a great number of people in this world in fact, perhaps the majority, who think that they have the truth, who think that they know with 100% certainty what the meaning of all of this is, who think they know with 100% certainty what the nature of life and of reality is, how one should live his or her life, what a society should be like, how decisions should be made, what happens to us after we die, all of these questions. There are so many people who think that they know the answers to these questions. Now, why do I say that this is a threat, and in fact, the biggest threat? Well, I believe that there may be such a thing as reality. We, as individuals, are existing in a context, in a physical context. For example, there is stuff, there are objects, there are beings outside of us, each as individuals. We have each other as human beings, and we have everything else around us. However, how do we interact with this reality? First, we have to perceive it through our senses. We have to see something, hear something, feel something, etc., in order to know that it's there. But as I'm sure we all know, our senses are certainly far from perfect. Even a fully functional, 100% healthy eye cannot take in all pieces of visual information in the environment at any given time. And the same goes for the other senses. So, and of course, not that many people have a perfectly functioning 20/20 vision eye. So we're already working, most of us, with senses that are working at less than full capacity. So there we are, we take in only a limited number of pieces of information from the environment. And then, what do we do with these? Well, our brain sorts through these pieces of information and decides which are the most important. And then it interprets these pieces of information. And how does it do both of these things? Based on our prior experiences up until that point, based on our framework of the world, of life, of existence, how we understand life and all the things that happen to us. And it attempts to fit these new pieces of information into this framework in order to explain them. Now, here we have millions of people, all with imperfect sense organs, taking in a limited number of pieces of information from the environment. And then we have all of these people interpreting this information based on their experiences, their framework of understanding of what life is. And of course, all of these people have different experiences. They have the information and the framework that their culture and their society give to them. And they have their own personal experiences as individuals. And all of that together forms each person's framework. So we have millions and millions of frameworks operating at the same time. Now, let's say one person is having a conversation with another person about something. Let's just take something as banal as an apple. The apple might be right there in front of them, but each of them is speaking from the interpretation that they have of that apple. So they are communicating about their own concepts, conceptualizations, and interpretations of what an apple is, of what this apple is. And neither of them has direct 100% access to that apple. They can only interact with the apple through their senses, and they can only really work with this mental conceptualization of the apple. And yet, each of them thinks he or she knows 100% what this apple is. They're absolutely sure about it. That's just an apple. But people talk about things a lot more controversial and problematic than an apple. Politics, religion, you name it. Most people, many people, when they're having a discussion, especially about something controversial, something that arouses emotions, they come to a point where they say, I'm right and you're wrong. And this is a problem. There's actually two problems here with this sentence. The first problem is I'm right, and I'm assuming here that means I'm 100% right. And the second problem is you're wrong, or at least you're 100% wrong. I'd like to quote from one of my favorite authors, Ken Wilber, who is a man, I think, who has a lot of important things to say for the world, who really is at a higher level of consciousness. And he said, I'm not sure exactly where, but I did see or hear this in one of his works, nobody has 100% of the truth. But at the same time, nobody has 0% of the truth. And I think this is really important, that only when a majority of people in the world come to understand this will there really be progress towards peace and a just world for all who live in it. I'd like to also quote from another of my absolute favorite authors, and that is Jalaluddin Rumi, the Persian poet who lived something like 1,000 years ago. And this guy, I think, was really something special, because if, at least this is my impression, if you read his poetry now in the 21st century, you could have the impression that he is writing that as we speak, that he's sitting there right now in the year 2013 and writing this. He really had the ability to transcend space and time. He wrote something like this, it's a loose quotation, that all of the conflicts between people are caused by words. Perhaps people are speaking about the same thing, but person A is using one word and person B is using a different word. For example, of course, one of the most controversial concepts, topics, is that of God. And we certainly know there are quite a few names for God and quite a few images or ways of understanding God in this world. And Rumi wrote that God is like sunlight pouring through a window. The sunlight hits everything in the room. And when it hits the wall on the right hand side, it looks one way. It has a certain color, there are certain shadows it produces. And when it hits the wall on the left side, it looks different. And when it hits the furniture, it looks yet even more different. And if you were to look at all of these things, all of these objects in the room, and you saw the sunlight hitting that, you might think that these are all different, coming from different suns, different types of sunlight, but they are all actually coming from the same sun. And this, Rumi said, is the nature of God. Can you imagine someone living 1,000 years ago thinking at that level of consciousness? It really, really amazes me. So I have a vision for the future of this world. And in this vision, a critical number of people, the majority of people, would understand that they have a limited number of pieces of information, limited exposure to reality and to all of the phenomena in existence on the physical plane as well as on the spiritual plane, as well as when it comes to God. And everybody, all of these people would say, I know that I do not have 100% access to the truth. I do not have 100% of the truth. I have my beliefs, I have my judgments, I have my impressions, I have my guesses. And that's okay, because that's part of this experience of being human. But I know that I do not have 100% access to the truth. This world, this universe, is such a complex, amazing, beautiful thing. How could I ever think that I could really 100% understand it, everything about it, in my mind, in my brain? And I know that all of these other 7 billion people on Earth, as well as all of the numerous people who lived before, also did not have 100% of the truth. However, I do not have 0% of the truth. I have some of it, a piece of it. I have a piece of all of the pieces of information in the world. I have a piece of the explanations for everything. And each of these other people also does not have 0% of the truth. Each of them has a piece of the puzzle. And I go out in the world and I gladly gladly interact with all who I meet, because I want to know about their little piece of the puzzle. I want to gain that knowledge too. And I know I'll never have 100%. But maybe if I listen to all of the people I meet and I interact with enough people, I can have more of the truth than I had before. And I think this is especially true when talking to people who seem to be polar opposites in terms of opinions, beliefs, etc. Who seem to have a totally different explanation, a totally different story for the universe, life, existence, society, everything. Because it is probably from those people that we can most improve and enlarge our understanding and gain a bigger percentage of the truth. Now imagine what would have happened in this country with the blind people if, instead of beginning to argue about the elephant, each of those people had said, okay, I experienced the elephant, and so did all of these other 4 people, and we all have different stories. Now what if we all listen to each other, and perhaps if we put all of this information together, we can have a better understanding of just what this elephant is like. So if any of my words today have struck a chord with you, have resonated with you at a deeper soul level, and you agree that this is something very important for the future of the world, then please go out today. Just go out and speak to somebody that you would not normally speak to. Speak to somebody who has a totally different opinion than you do. It's difficult because, of course, there's security when we speak to those who agree with us, who have the same worldview, come from the same cultural background. There's security in that, and it's difficult and it's scary to go and interact with people who are different from us. But go and do it. And while you're doing that, pay attention to whatever reactions come up inside of you. And that's okay. It's only natural to feel anger or any other sorts of emotional reactions. And when you feel those, just remind yourself that you, just like this other person, just like me, we all only have a piece of the puzzle. And this person has his or her opinions. They don't come from a vacuum. He has these opinions because he has had experiences that you have not had, that you may never have. So you may learn about those things from him. And that may add to your understanding of the world. I wish you love and light and learning and development. And until next time, bye bye.